we got to get in here. We got to move on. It is the off season. So as you know, recently the Senior Bowl went down. We've been following a couple players, following the game. Some of our coaches were down there. Always good to see. But it's happened. We've seen the practice. We've seen who stood out. Will, I'm going to come to you first. What are some of your thoughts from after the game? Any players? Like, what are some of the things you're thinking, man?
Yeah. So as we talked about last week, this is kind of a big deal for us because we draft a lot of the guys that we draft come from the Senior Bowl practices. That's where they really saw Brian Robinson last year and Fedarian Mathis, and so it's important that our scouts are paying attention. And I saw on this one in particular our scout line, which is important. Talking, in our own chats about how important it is to improve that and just kind of taking a look. Plus, we've had our coaches. Some of our assistants have been right in there. Ryan Kerrigan was coaching the defensive linemen. Jennifer King was coaching the running backs. What I saw, no surprise, was that a couple of the offensive linemen that were going in shined a whole lot. To the point where now you may be looking at some first-round picks for some guys, like a first-round pick out of the for a center out of Minnesota by the name of John Michael Schmitz. They said he had a phenomenal Senior Bowl week. A guard has already been mocked to us. The guy from Florida, Osiris Torrance. I think it was an ESPN mock draft that they went with him. There was a dude from North Dakota State, another guard tackle named Cody Mock. He's that's my boy. That's the type of guy. I sent you the picture, Sean, and Sean's like, he had teeth missing. Sean's like, that's a hog right there. That's who we want. So it was, there were some names there that were, that shined. A couple tackles as well. Was the guy from Tennessee, Taylor, the Ohio State guy, DeJuan Jones, and Syracuse's tackle.
That's what I was going to bring up.
Big guy.
6'8", 350, something like
huge
that.
Huge guy.
Big boy.
He did so well that after one day of practice, he mysteriously had a headache and went home for the day. And so it basically, essentially, he proved himself really well. And then I think there was a tackle, Matthew Bergeron, as well, that did real well. So those were some like the offensive linemen, which, Jack, you and I have been talking a lot about how important it is for us to improve our offensive line. Were there any other names that stood out to you? What did you hear?
I'm surprised you didn't bring up your boy, Jalen Duncan, tackle out of Maryland.
I know. I talked a lot right there.
So, again, like we've talked about before, this is a draft that's going to be heavy on offensive line and corner. And it seems like there was a lot of guys shining in that regard. So, I think we're in a good spot with that first round pick, not to potentially have to trade back and, really fill one of our needs. So I was keeping track of that. Like, I know tight end's not necessarily a huge need, but the guy Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State looked pretty solid. Big dude, like 6'5", 6'6", 255 pounds. Like, somebody we can keep our eye on, especially I'm hoping Logan Thomas bounces back this year, but we'll see. Carl Brooks out of Bowling Green, another big defensive tackle. He could potentially put up the middle if Deron Payne ends up walking. Let's see here. So DeJuan Jones.
Who else stood out to you on offense?
Oh, that's a good question.
Was there anybody else on offense? I think you bring up a great point about Luke Musgrave, and I'll let you say anyone else. Otherwise, and then I've got a thought about the tight end position.
I saw them mention Jake Hayner a lot as well out of Fresno State. So another potential later round pick that they could use to get a quarterback to back up Sam Howell, which is something they need. I didn't keep a lot of tabs on wide receiver or running back since I think we're kind of set on those positions coming up. But just looking for potentially one of those quarterbacks falling out of the first round. Maybe we can pick him up the second, third round like we kind of did with Sam Howell. Like you just don't know with how the draft's going to fall. So
now don't spoil your the later segments of how to improve the quarterback part.
Yeah,
but you brought up a good part. Two things you brought up there that I really liked was you mentioned the tight end, and I was listening to a pod by John Kime last week, and he was talking about how we had such poor production from the tight ends. Is now a time to cut Logan Thomas so that you can and then draft a tight end early enough where you get some much better production because they like Armani Rogers. They like Cole Turner, who showed us nothing. I don't know. I think it's too early to cut Logan Thomas.
No,
I just think there's two players that they're too raw behind him right now. So I don't know if I saw Luke Musgrave shining, but I don't know if I like that strategy that was brought up.
He doesn't have the same ceiling that Thomas does. So, like you can't expect those guys to step up. Like you're not going to get the Logan Thomas that you had 2 years ago, where he was close to leading the team in receptions. Like it's just
right.
You're not going to be able to fill that. The guy's coming off a major knee injury, so I'm really hoping that he was just kind of playing a little bit dinged up last year, and then with the full off season, a full year to recover, you might see the guy that you had 2 years ago.
Right.
So
right. It's a good point.
Yeah.
Sean, was there anyone on offense that stood out to you at the Senior Bowl?
So I agree. I looked at, saw Jake Hayner, just like he was talking about, put up some numbers. Obviously, since you shouted out your boy from Shepherd, I kept an eye on him, and I saw the interception he threw.
He did.
Look, he got in the action. Shout out to the guy. Honestly, in my opinion, look, I went to obviously the position I played in high school, my favorite position, the running back position. And one of the guys that I saw that I think took a real hit because he was out for a good portion of the year, Chris Rodriguez Jr. He could be a nice little third back. Well, we don't know what's going to happen with Gibbs, so we want to keep him, but he's been injured in the fumbling issues. But then you got Patterson and you got Jonathan Williams, who showed up later in the season, but they're not going to be in the 1 or 2. So if we could potentially move on and bring in a guy like that, then another guy on running back is Evan Hall out of Northwestern, who first 2 or 3 plays just blew it out the water. And I'm looking at this from not only a running back perspective, but also a potential kick return perspective.
Sure.
What's his name? Mr. Steal Your Girl's best friend, Dax Milne. He's not going to give us any kind of threat on return. And if we don't have Gibson in there, I mean, basically wherever Dax Milne catches it is where it's going to be down. He's going to within a 5-yard radius. So let's get in a guy like Rodriguez. And I don't know Rodriguez plays return, but Evan Hall has that kind of small. He's small package. We had that speed to him. You got guys like Jalen Reed, shout out Michigan State, who's a smaller guy, but it's like a Jahan Dotson, who's very quick. He's very explosive. So I'm thinking about some of those other areas that, maybe the X factor. We know about the offense, and you were talking about Cody Mock. That's my guy. When I looked at his picture with the 2 missing teeth, I was like, oh, he loves the slop. He just get in there. You know what I mean? So honestly, in my opinion, I wanted to look for some other little pieces that we could potentially use. But I also did look at quarterback because you're absolutely right. We know Sam Howell is the guy right now. But at the same time, what kind of guy is that? Do we have Taylor? Will we have him? Not to get too far into what we're going to talk about. But we might need to pick somebody up. And we saw Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, had a great year. Mind you, he had a lot of talent around him. But I honestly, I don't think we need to be out of the quarterback search necessarily. We need to make sure that we have guys in there that can continue to compete, and we'll see from there. So those are my perspective. That was more on the outside, more of the position, outside position groups, as opposed to maybe the O-line or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted us to break it down offense and defense, because this will give me a chance to highlight someone that I pointed out weeks ago for the record. I read, because as we're going to talk about, the biggest offseason, news for the Commanders is what to do with Deron Payne. And I wanted to see in the Senior Bowl what happened with Wisconsin's defensive tackle, Keanu Benton. And I saw multiple reports that he was absolutely unstoppable out there. Which I was, thrilled to hear, just as a potential replacement. Like if we need to draft, Deron Payne's replacement or someone to kind of groom in that position. The other one I heard on defense was, I can't pronounce his last name. I'm not going to try right now. He's from Northwestern. He's a defensive lineman. And they talk about, you know what I'm talking about?
Initials are AA. Yeah,
yes,
I know you're talking
exactly.
about. Close
and
enough.
They said, he still needs to add some weight, but as a pass rusher, this last week he was very tough for and as we mentioned, we've got some guys who could be first and second round picks that were having trouble against him out there. So those were 2 things we're kind of talking about, when we're looking at roster management and what to do with Deron Payne, and can you afford to franchise tag or have high costs at the same position for two players, smart teams would be building through the draft. So that's kind of what I was looking for.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
The other one that I read about that absolutely made me go, I wonder when he's going to get picked, because this is exactly what I'm looking for. He's a linebacker out of Washington State by the name of Deion Henley. And he's a wide receiver that converted to linebacker, so he's fast. And they said he could keep up with all the running backs, all the tight ends. He could go sideline to sideline. And if you think about it, we need to be improving our linebacker core and our special teams. What a better player with all that speed to pair right next to Jamin, and really, really cover the field at that second level.
Still have him playing off ball, something along those lines.
Exactly.
Move Jamin in the middle. Okay.
Exactly. So I saw that guy. Like, I'm curious after the Senior Bowl where these guys start getting mocked. Do they start rising up the boards, or are they kind of staying further back? Was there anyone else on defense? I think you started to. I don't know if I cut you off or not on it. That anyone else on defense that stood out to you?
There's just the normal guys like Jack Campbell out of Iowa, another big middle linebacker. I forget what award he was awarded this year, but I'm surprised that he's that far down the list of top inside linebackers.
Yeah.
A lot of different corners. Again, like the cornerback depth is great this year for the draft. So I think maybe any guys dropping out of the first or second round, you could really get some value there. But just to name a few, we got let's see here, Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State, Garrett Williams out of Syracuse, maybe DJ Turner out of Michigan for you, something like that.
Right.
There's a few guys that have good size that could play both both zone and man depending on what we're looking to run next year. So
yeah.
I didn't catch too much of it. I was too busy watching the Pro Bowl, but watching my boy Kirk in the Pro Bowl, man.
Oh gosh, I can't say that I saw a single bit. I saw clips afterwards, but I didn't. How was the? Well, we'll get to the Pro Bowl in a second. We'll stay on topic here. I love how you said something about quarterbacks, because that's exactly what I was looking at too. Is like, okay, what corners shined here? One of the ones that you mentioned, size. It's a local guy, your dad's alma mater, Anthony Johnson from the University of Virginia.
Yeah, 6'2". Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
Sean and I always talk about it. I look at all these corners with size that are that are 6 foot, 6'2", 200 pounds. I just feel like that's the only way to compete in today's game is to match up these bigger receivers. So I love the Legion of Boom that Seattle had built.
Absolutely.
I saw another guy. Now he's been injured, but he's from Iowa. His name is Riley Moss, but they said he can play multiple cornerback positions. He can go inside, he can go outside, he can play zone, he can play man. Because I think that's going to be really important with the versatility that Jack Del Rio likes to do. The other one, I'm sorry that Sean's not here right now to hear me say this, but one of my guys here from DBU at South Carolina, Darius Rush, was a name that played really well. Excuse me. Now, I will say, I was a little bit surprised. I was happy for him, obviously, that he performed well, but I was a little bit surprised that he did so well there, because I can't say I saw a whole lot on the field, while watching games this year. But the NFL is a different ball game, so maybe he's better suited to that.
Different speed, different work. Who knows? He could be just need a different coaching aspect or something along those lines to take that next step. So
exactly,
yeah, it's really tough to read these guys completely. Especially off a couple games, and then 3 years in college plus the Senior Bowl.
Right.
That's why you see a lot of undrafted free agents hit it big. You just don't know. They just have to make it through their rookie contract, and then got a lot of guys that are coming up right now that I think are going to get paid this year. So
absolutely.